At 22 years of age, I met Dr. Lyman Steil, or simply Manny. After I bombed in my first paid professional speech, Manny said to me, "Kid, keep going. You're going to be just fine." A month ago, Manny and I had breakfast, and he said to me, "Mark, you are now one of the youngsters of the oldsters." Manny is a speaker worth listening to, and I have been listening to Manny for the better part of 39, nearly 40 years. Manny is a certified speaking professional and a CPAE, a Hall of Fame speaker within the National Speakers Association. He was the founder of the International Listening Association. You are seated in the virtual front row of a seasoned veteran and master of his craft. I present to you my mentor and my friend, Dr. Lyman K. Manny Steil. Hey, Manny. Oh, I think you're on mute.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Perfect. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. You're very, very kind. It's been a nice ride along the way with you and our many friends.
Well, thank you for being with us today. And I've got a few questions, but before I start asking you some questions, would you be so kind to just give us a little bit of a background and what we would refer to as a bit of your defining story? How did you get from there to where you are now?
One of my favorite questions, when I talk to people, how did you get from there to here? Because everyone has a story. Well, growing up in a small town like you did, and being a high school wrestler like you were, although you were much better than I was, when I was 17 years old, I realized I was mature enough to realize I was not mature enough to go to college or the university. Joined the Navy, served in the U.S. Navy submarine service, got out of that, came back to the University of Minnesota, focused on business until somebody told me one day that communication is the key to success in business. And so I have a business, psychology, communication background. When I got out, I was going into business, but I got hired by a company, and good old guy that hired me, Frank Madden, said, I see you have a teaching certificate. He said, "What are you going to do with that?" I said, "Well, someday maybe I'd like to take a look at that." He said, "Why don't you go look at it now?" So I went, I taught high school for a year, came back to the university. And my interest was piqued when I was teaching high school, that kids today don't learn much about listening, the topic of listening. So I came back to the University of Minnesota, met Dr. Ralph Nichols, the father of the field of listening, and studied with him, worked on my master's, all that kind of stuff. And Nick turned into one of my great, great friends, etc. Taught for 6 years at Macalester College, came back to Minnesota, taught at Minnesota for 14 years. But all along I was speaking. My first paid speech was in 1964. Put that in a little perspective. But what I discovered was that listening was a significant missing link in the world of learning and relationships and so forth. So that's what I have been doing for a few years, and still doing it, and still having fun, and it's hopefully still making an impact.
Oh, I know you are, because you certainly have had an impact on this youngster.
Yeah.
Manny, would you just, I know you shared Dr. Ralph Nichols. Besides Dr. Ralph, are there one or two people that have had significant influence on your career?
Well, that is such a great question, but I don't know how you narrow it down to two, but I'll give you two. Obviously, my late wife, Sweet Deasy, married 48 years, passed away 10 years ago, just a couple of weeks ago. She was a tremendous influence in my life, made me a better person than I was and am. And then, of course, Dr. Ralph Nichols. I gave him the title of the father of the field of listening. He was a major, major impactor. And then all of our NSA friends and ILA friends, International Association friends, all of those folks, my old coaches, my teachers, they've all had an impact. And if everyone listening to this thinks about it for a moment, if you were to ever make a list of all of the people who made a major impact on where you are today, obviously it'll be much more than two people. But I think you can rank order them to some degree. And so those areas of people are the ones that have had a major impact, not only in my profession, but in my life, just like you.
Well, certainly you're at the top of my list, Manny, and
Thank you.
I will forever be grateful.
Thank you.
I've learned so much from you, and there's something that I've always been fascinated by. I didn't understand it maybe as much when I was starting out in my 20s and 30s, but I certainly understand it today. When you think about marketing, what marketing idea or concept have you followed along the way that has served you maybe even better than you thought it would?
Well, as a speaker and as a consultant and as an author, those three areas, I have a firm belief that you have to find something that you absolutely love and are focused on that will make a difference for other people. And in my case, it was the area of listening. And we also, our company does a lot of very deep, comprehensive personality assessment, diagnostic profiling work as well. But what I've discovered along the way is that once you identify that area of focus that burns in your heart, your head will follow. Okay. And I think it's a great question that you asked, because I've always had a theory that do every presentation or every consulting piece of work or whatever so that the phone rings at least twice. And mathematically, if you think about it, you give one speech. If it's great enough that two people call, you give a speech that's great enough that four people call, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. That's been my marketing strategy all along, although obviously there are other components of that, but it all stems from doing really good, great work that serves other people. You do that, you stay busy for, what am I at now? 64 years, 1964. And I'm just a youngster, you know.
Well, I hate to admit it. I did share that I didn't quite understand your theory of being so good that the phone would ring twice after every presentation. And I've often shared that the biggest mistake I've made in my career is thinking that I was better than I was, and always looking for the latest and greatest state-of-the-art, cutting-edge marketing strategy that would fill my calendar with more of the speeches and presentation opportunities. And you know, I need to hear things, even though I work to listen as well as I can. It took me several decades to understand that the best marketing strategy is just to be damn good on the platform or when you're standing in front of a group.
And that doesn't mean you don't make the trek without some humility along the way and continue to grow and continue to learn. But I think the ultimate measure is along the way, do you do enough great work that other people want to work with you? And you're a great example of that. Henry's a great example of that. The people that I've been listening to all morning are examples of that. But growth continues. Growth continues.
Thank you. And we certainly are champions of people. This morning we had Darren LaCroix and Mark Brown.
I listened to them.
Two world-class champions, as well as Eleni Kalakos will be on this afternoon. And so working on your craft is never out for the professional. Manny, next question I have for you is, you certainly have been in the field for some time, and I have seen repeatedly the extent of your library, or at least your library that is visible, because I know you probably have other rooms and other boxes of books that you've read and accumulated over the course of time. But is there two, maybe three books that stand out in your mind as having had deep impact on your life and work?
Well, as you know, Mark, I'm an eclectic reader. I read broadly, and books do accumulate. I had a challenge when we remodeled a few years back to give 1,100 books away. You try to give 1,100 books away, even though they're great books, and it's a challenge in today's world. But I have a wonderful library. The number one book in my mind, in my life, is the Bible. Okay, that's a beginning point. Number two, the other great books that in my library are the ones that I've written. for me, because I go back and I reread them sometimes, and I'm working on 3 more right now, and it's amazing. You discover things that you wrote that you need to reread and so forth. Last year, I read 101 books, to give you an example. Maybe that was because of the pandemic and so forth. But I very quickly tell you the story. I was in Danny Cox's, he invited me to his library. Everybody gets invited to the late Danny Cox's library. And wonderful library, beautiful library, personal library. And I asked him, I said, Danny, you live in the land of earthquakes and fires and mudslides. If you had to vacate quickly, what books would you take? And that's an interesting question that all of us should ask. Out of all the books that we have, what books would you take if you had to vacate quickly? And he reached off over on the shelf and he pulled out a book, and he said, Albert Hubbard, 14-volume book. 14-volume book set called Journeys into the Homes of. And each book has focus on orators, or focuses on mathematicians or artists or teachers or philosophers, etc. It's one of my prized set of 14 books. In fact, I was just reading yesterday the chapter about Marcus Aurelius. And so when you go back and you read books within your field or beyond your field, it strengthens your field no matter what it is. So ton of books. I love them all, the ones that stand out. By the way, I also pulled out 3 books that you wrote a while back. One called Growing Your Business. And I noticed here on page 65 in that book that you talk about the greatest marketing strategy in the world. And you were kind. You gave me credit because in 1983, you said you heard me conduct a presentation how to listen more effectively. And I talked about the circle of 25 most important people in the world. That's Mark LeBlanc's first book that he wrote. And then, of course, Build Your Consulting Practice and Growing, Defining You. And probably the best book he wrote is the Never the Same book, because we all are products of what we experience in life. And I know that, what, 3 times you've made the trek, and you're going to go again. And it's impacted you positively every time you've done that. So there's a library of books. The Daily Stoic is a book that I love. The John Maxwell books are great books. And I know that you're helping a number of people writing other great books, getting them printed and so forth. So that was too long of an answer, but books are different from what we just listen to. Listening's important, it's critical, it's powerful. But books you can go back and read and reread and highlight and dog ear or whatever you do with them. So keep up your good work with what you're doing there.
Well, thank you, Manny, because if there was a fire, I'd be grabbing Never Be the Same. I go back and reread that, and I think, man, this is really good. In fact, I have labeled the publishing of Never Be the Same as my crowning achievement of my career to date. I'm more proud of that book than anything else that I have achieved. So thank you for that. Manny, when I met you in 1983 and I was 22, and I mean, I was really somewhat starstruck and awestruck, and you've been so kind to invite me into your home for meals. I think I've stayed in your guest room on occasion. I certainly knew Dee and miss her a lot, and I've watched your kids grow up. And but when I met you, I was awestruck about a relationship that you had. I believe it was with Sperry Univac. In my language today, we would call that a whale. That you had an amazing contract or agreement with Sperry. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what that was and how that came to be?
Well, just real quickly, of course, the University of Minnesota was the hub of the wheel of listening from the 1940s on. So when Dr. Nichols retired and I took over the department and the listening area, one day my phone rang and it was an advertising agency in New York City, Scally, McCabe's and Sloves. And they told me that they were competing for a $5 million contract. And they wanted to build an ad campaign for this company, didn't tell me who, built around listening. And David Wolf, I said, what was the theme? He said, blah, 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 blah. The difference is we listen. By the way, I was 40 years old at the time. It was 1979. It was a watershed year. And I said, it's a lousy theme. You know, sometimes we're too brash when we're younger. We learn later on. But I said, lousy theme. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, who says the difference that you listen? How do you know? How'd you measure that? By the way, do you know what other companies have done with the topic of listening and advertising? He didn't know any of that. But he wouldn't tell me the company. He called me 4 times in 4 days. And one day I hung up, my phone rang. I don't know if you believe in karma or not, but the phone rang within 15, 30 seconds. And it was a guy by the name of Peter Hines at the Sperry Corporation. The Sperry Corporation had 5 divisions, 5 companies: Sperry Univac, Sperry New Holland, Sperry Flight Systems, et cetera, et cetera. And Peter Hines said, we're putting together a $5 million ad campaign, and we've got 4 companies that are competing for it. And we're going to build it around listening. And we don't know anything about listening, but all the doors, all the paths lead back to your door. See, there's that moment of that we never know, isn't there? Had I not been in the office that day, had I not picked up the phone, who knows? And I said, but now I knew the name of the company. And I said, so I suppose the theme is Sperry. The difference is we listen. He said, who are you talking to? I said, one of those 4 companies. I said, it's a lousy theme. He said, what do you mean? I said, how do you know? Who says that? Don't pet it. And the point being, the conclusion was, he said, you have a better theme. I said, I think so. That led to a 5-year contractual relationship. And the key to it all was I came up with the theme, Sperry, we understand how important it is to listen. But the real key was I then flew into New York City and met with the top 10 officers, CEO, chairman, COO, CFO, et cetera, and said, you can advertise all you want, but if you don't focus on developing your people, it'll work against you. They had 94,000 employees throughout the 5 different companies. And that's what, amongst other things, I had a beautiful contract with them. I went out, spoke all over the world with all the people. We covered about 75,000 people at that time. And so that was a watershed moment. 1979 was also the year that I founded the International Listening Association, which is still 43 years later. We have membership in, 25 countries around the world. Still a small organization, it needs to grow. But these are the moments that when you look back, you realize that there's a moment of fortune, opportunity, meeting the right people, but having something significant to give to them that serves them. And that was a prize-winning 5-year impact for the Sperry Corporation. That's the short story. Traveled all over the world with the chairman of the board, CEO chairman of the board, Paul E.A. And it was kind of like a dog and pony show. He would get up and do a little introduction about what they were advertising, and then he would say, and he was the guy who put it all together. That developed more business for me because people would come to Sperry and say, we want some of that. And they would say, well, go find Dr. Steil. Yeah, so more than you wanted to know.
Oh, no, not at all. I think we all aspire to find some organization that will adopt and our work or put us in different cities or different regions or different departments. And I was 22 and I thought, wow, could something like that ever happen for me? And it took me 3 decades to develop a relationship with JP Morgan Chase Bank. But
yeah, well, look what you're doing with the Achievers Circle. If you remember, you helped me with it. They had Achievers Canada. I developed Achievers USA in the United States with speakers, and only lost $70,000 in that episode. But because of my own fault, I tried to do everything. I tried to sell memberships. I worried about the hotel, the food, the this, the that, the speakers. As you know, 1988, 89, you were very helpful in helping me lose all that money. But no, you were very helpful in making that a success. And I loved it when you spun off the Achievers Circle, the anti-boot camp concept. And that you're still doing it, and that you're still helping people grow what they do. It's all connections in life. And one of the beauties is I'm at a stage now, I'm still serving on 2 or 3 boards, nonprofit boards, and I'm still working. As I mentioned in the breakout moment, I believe that retirement is retirement are the 3 worst words in the English language. And I think the substitution words are refire, refired, retirement. And so what I'm focused on now is philanthropy. How do we help other people with scholarship funds and all that? You know that. So more than you wanted to know there.
No, it's never more than I want to know. Manny, you said earlier that you've got 3 books on the burner that are in process. One, haven't you pretty much done it all? Why would you be working on not just your next book, but 3 books in somewhat tandem?
Well, let me say this. The last book I wrote was Listening Leaders, the 10 Golden Rules to Listen, Lead, and Succeed. Wrote that in 2004, okay? And in the process of that, interviewed 100 and some leaders throughout the world in many different walks of life. By the way, the material in that book, the 10 golden rule concept, etc., is as pertinent today, probably more pertinent today. It was pertinent then, but it's probably more pertinent today because of what's going on in the world. Listening is if people don't listen to each other, we see what happens as a result. Okay? In the process, I wrote 600 newsletters from 204, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I got 600 newsletters where I'd pick a topic and do a ding, ding, ding. And so what I'm now doing is I'm writing what I call a calendar book, where you take that one little thought a day and so forth. I've got a quotation book, okay, related to the topics. And then I have a humor book. The material is largely written, it needs to be tweaked a little bit, but I'm going through and I'm picking out the topical areas that are pertinent today. Now I know I can put it on, I can do it electronically and I can do it all that, but I'm a book guy. I like to feel a book. I like to smell a book. I like to dog ear a book. I like to reread pertinent parts of a book and so forth. And I listen to a lot of podcasts and all of that, but and I know they can be recorded, but I love books. So that's what I'm doing with those 600 newsletters. Here's a topic. I just read one last night that I wrote. Now, by the way, it was about listening leaders, but I'm just focusing on listeners, period. But the topic was listening leaders manage mendacity. Mendacity, the act of lying, liars, etc. Well, we live in a world of extended mendacity nowadays. And so in listening to liars, a special challenge. So there's a topical little piece right there. Or the one I wrote some years ago on Valentine's Day, so forth. And this is pertinent material, and that's why I could just let my kids deal with it when I'm gone, but they're not going to write a book. So I'm going to write 3 of them now. I'm working on them. I love the 17-minute concept a day. So more than you wanted to know there. Yeah.
With Darren LaCroix.
Yeah.
His 17-minute book, I read his manuscript and I called him, I said, we need to talk. And I literally begged him if he would let me write the foreword. And I think his upcoming book will be out soon. And I think it's, to use one of his words, it's a game changer. His story and his philosophy and what he's been through and the scars on his heart and the disappointments that he's had along the way, but his philosophy around 17 minutes is golden. Thank you, Darren. I see you out there, and count me a fan. I can hardly wait.
I'm looking forward to seeing your Rainmaker Confidential book. The interesting thing, we never know about the impact we have on other people. Everybody goes through tragedies. In my life, lost a grandson, 18-year-old, to suicide, and nobody understands that to this day. You lose your loved, your wonderful spouses and parents, and by the way, your group ought to know that you are to be commended because you talk to your father every day. That's a son that deserves applause every day, and you've got a great family. But to me, the key is to find something that burns in your heart that will be productive and helpful to others, and you put it together in a way that it makes sense to them. Whether it's the speaking, the consulting, the writing, whatever. So, and I commend what you and Henry have been doing, and Vicky, who's your other author? Or Kathy, your other co-author. Great work.
Thank you, Manny.
Yeah.
You mentioned something a little bit ago, and I'd love for you to give us just a snapshot into it. You mentioned personalysis.
Yeah.
And that is a profiling tool
Yeah.
that you have used, I want to say, for almost 30 years now, if I recall right. I mean, you profiled me a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Can you talk about personalysis and the power of the
What we
right
do?
tool?
Yeah. I've been utilizing the profiling tool for 37 years. I've profiled tens and tens of thousands of people in all walks of life. I was with a client, two clients yesterday, where everybody in their organization is profiled. They won't hire anybody without profiling. And the key and the difference from what we do compared to all the other profiling assessment tools is, if you look at the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and the California Inventory, the 16PF and all of those, they're all good tools. They're all valid. They're all reliable. They all have utility, but they're all limited because I've been through all of those and many others. And what it says about me, because I answer the questions, is correct, but not complete. So those are unidimensional tools. So what we do is we utilize the 5-dimensional tools where we identify what drives a person instinctively, the need to dimension, the taught, train, learn, the social dimension, and the rational dimension, the like to. And those profiles may not be the same. And then also we identify what drives a person when they're in distress or severe distress. The client that I was with yesterday, I was working with some people where the owner was in severe distress. And so we worked with the people that were causing the severe distress and so forth. But, Socrates said, above all else, know thyself. And Manny Steil says, secondly, above all else, know thy others. My wife and I had a phenomenal marriage. We had a great marriage for the first 15 years, a great marriage. And then when I learned more about myself and she learned more about herself, and then we learned more about each other, a great marriage became a phenomenal marriage. Our kids are all profiled. We raised them differently once we understood what drove them, what they needed, expected, and liked. And all my grandkids are profiled now. And it's just rich. But go back and read Socrates in terms of his work. And if you don't know yourself, what drives you, it's hard to impact other people in a productive way. But when you know yourself, you know each other. The key people in your world, or the key people that you're working with, changes everything. And you've proven that with the stuff that you've done. Yeah.
Thank you, Manny. Earlier you talked about refired, and refirement.
Yeah.
At this stage of what I would call your camino, your way and your journey, what are you most fired up about at this stage of your career?
The nonprofit work that I'm doing, as you know, because by the way, I commend you because you're doing the same thing where you're providing scholarship help and to entrepreneurs and so forth. I've served on a number of boards, Education Foundation boards. I've served on another one called Operation Restore Oral Health that's focused on providing no fee assistance to veterans who need help there. You're in the dental world now, you know that. But I've been focused for a number of years on building endowed scholarships. And And so when you can put together something beyond yourself that will live way beyond your being here, that will help other people be better because you impacted them. That's where my focus primarily is right now. I'm not skiing anymore after I tore my Achilles, but so I, between the philanthropic work is where I'm really focused. How do we help other people in their educational pursuits or their health pursuits?
I'm sorry to hear that you're not skiing anymore. I did not know that. But one of the things that you always and maybe I got it from you, but I'm always framing something by numbers or what I call benchmarks, or someone said to me once, what gets measured is treasured. And but I was always taken and inspired when you would say, my goal is to ski my age.
Well, at 83, I'm not skiing right now. I could ski, but I tore my Achilles 3 years ago, and it's pretty well healed up. But my good doctor said, just go out and enjoy the snow. And so I've become the Uber driver for my kids and grandkids when they're out there. Yes.
That's neat.
So.
Manny, thank you so much for being with us and being with our indie books. You certainly, as I shared, at the top of my list of people who have had incredible impact and influence on my career. And I know that people who have followed me for 5 or 10 or 20 years are probably seeing a little bit of you in me over the course of time. And I will forever be grateful for our relationship and friendship. And people need to also know one other thing that I'm grateful for. And when you serve as president of the National Speakers Association, you are given the opportunity to find one person that will sit on the board during your term of service as a board appointee. And when I was elected vice president of the National Speakers Association, and I was reminded that I needed a board appointee, you were the only person that I even considered. And I knew it was a difficult time with Dee, and yet you said yes. And you served with grace and supported me along the way in ways that were and continue to be immeasurable.
Well, thank you, Mark. You should also add the fact that you did not tell me that I would not have a vote. Because they didn't want to have your appointee and you having 2 votes. Yeah. And they changed that the next year, as I remember.
They did, because of you.
Yeah.
And because of your recommendations around that. So yeah. Your impact, the ripple effect of your work and your impact, and not just, I think, Manny, it goes way beyond what you do and what you have done. It's who you are, and it's what you stand for. And I honor you today, and thank you.
Well, I thank you, and it's I don't know if everybody that is on this call, we've had 3 great presidents of NSA who are from the Minnesota chapter. Tom Winiger, Mike McKinley, and Mark LeBlanc. And as a consequence, a large number of people have done a great amount of great work around the world as a consequence, because of the 3 of you and what you all did. So keep at it. And by the way, I need to, when I get the next 3 books totally organized, I want you folks to handle that however you can. You know, I've had McGraw-Hill, and I've had, you know, a number of those other major publishers, but I'd like to work with you folks.
Oh, that'd be great, Manny.
Good.
Thank you. You have a great rest of your day and weekend, and just listen.
Remember one thing: listening pays in many ways.
In many ways.
Listening pays in many ways. My favorite quotation that I created: listening pays in many ways. And by the way, we'll never know sometimes how it pays. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, God bless you all. Good work. And it's been a pleasure listening to the previous speakers, and focus on refirement. I told somebody in the breakout that there's some good information, particularly for men, but women are catching up, unfortunately. And that is, men who retire at 65, on average, die by the age of 72.
Mm.
And so you just find something that you love, that you're interested in, that you're willing to put the spotlight beam on, focus on, get up in the morning. If you can get up in the morning without setting your alarm, you know that you've got something that you're refired about.
Yeah.
And stay at it. God bless you.
That's great. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you.
Would you give it